So yesterday we were talking about what is model, what is MVC and what is controller, how to create service layer, how to create DAO layer. Today we are going to talk about how the DAO layer will be connected with database and fetch data from database. For this session, I'm going to use MySQL database. I mean, you can use any type of database, Oracle or any other database, just because MySQL is open source, and that's the reason we are going to use MySQL for and as a database for this session. Now, to do that, first of all, you need to have your database setup ready. So for that example, I'm going to use, I have set up my own local database. So I'm going to use, let's say, probably I can create a new database schema. So you can see here, whenever you are connected to SQL Server, you get an option, something like this. But, you don't, if you have an existing schema, you can connect. For this example, I'm going to create a new schema because we are starting from scratch. Now, here I'm saying full stack. That's it. That's my schema name. Now you can see the schema is created here. That is full stack, and no tables, no views, nothing. It's just a blank schema. Now I'm going to create users and privileges. This can be done only when you are server admin, database server administration rights. Otherwise, you can't do it. So I'm creating login name. And I'm creating the same password. Just for the sake of example, in real-time world, the passwords will be very stricter and very secretive. So I'm creating the same password as a login name. Apply. And you can see a new user is created here, full stack. And for this user,
1 minute.
Yeah.
Like, can you change that password? We are going to upload this one in YouTube, right? May become any problem?
No, because I'm using only local database. Nobody can access my local database.
Okay.
So that's the reason I'm using local databases.
Okay.
So now I'm selecting the schema, and then for that full stack, I'm giving access rights to full stack schema. And then, these are all grant rights. Don't worry about it too much because this is one-time setup when the project is set up. So now everything is done here. Now let's go back how you can connect to the database that we just created. So let me use Spring Boot. Okay. I'll use my another project for sake of this demo. Okay. So now once your database is ready and you set up everything, now this is the configuration that you need to use in application.properties file. Now, you already know that we have the application properties file. You can see here. So here earlier we have configured JSP. Now we are configuring database. So now if you look at here, because this is nothing but database that I have set up at local IP address and the port number. By default, MySQL runs on the port number 3306, and this one. This is nothing but the schema name. So the schema name that we set up is full stack. And what is the username we set up? Same thing. And the password set up? Same thing. So this is the configuration. Whenever Spring Boot is started the application, it will read through all these properties, and it will use all these values to establish communication to the database. So this is not only enough to establish database connection. So we got to do a few more things. So now, once you have that set up, let's see, configuration. So now you have to I'm going to create a new file, new Java class. So I'm creating a new package because these are all kind of configurations to be available when the application is startup. So I'm creating a new package. There is nothing but configuration package. So any application specific configuration file should go into this package. Now, here I'm going to create a new class. Let me see. You can create any name. Just for the sake of it, I have created something like this. This name is not specific. You can use any name of your choice. Now, a new class is created. The first thing you have to do is @configuration. So now it will figure something from arg Spring Framework.context. So that means the purpose of this annotation is whenever the application Spring Boot starts up the Tomcat server and starts up the application, it will read through all the annotations that give. So whenever it reads the @configuration, Spring will treat it as a configuration file. So now whatever you write inside, everything will become as a configurable. So now what I do is, you can see, I'll just copy this one and explain you. Now, so here, you already know AutoWire annotation, and then, so these are all entity manager factor. So if you can see here, these are all coming from, okay, I did not have that configuration. So now there is no entity manager entity manager factory is not available.
Sorry, can you actually repeat? Your voice was breaking.
Okay. So you're able to hear me properly? You're able to hear me properly? 1 minute.
Yeah, I can hear you properly.
Now you're able to hear me properly?
Yeah, I can hear now, but before I wasn't able to hear.
Okay, that's fine. So now, whenever I say entity manager factory, I'm not having any of these in the available classes with the current configuration. So now I'm going to add the dependency in pom.xml. So because these are all coming from Hibernate, we never configured Hibernate on the pom.xml file. Let's see this. So this one. Okay. Not this one is needed, only 2. So now in the pom.xml, you have to add the additional dependencies. So what did I do? I have added only 2 dependencies here. This is the JPA. This is nothing but Java Spring Java JPA. So this dependency you need, And the second dependency you need is MySQL connector. So by using this dependency only, you can be able to establish connection to MySQL Server database. Now, so I have added these two dependencies. Now, you can see Entity Manager Factory is available from these two dependencies. So now it's there. Now you can see here also Session Factory is coming from Hibernate. So because we configured that. And this is a normal bean. Okay. So now you see that all the dependencies are available. So that's why you're not seeing any compile time errors. Now, so what this means? Here what we are doing is we are configuring Entity Manager Factory and we are establishing a Session Factory. That means whenever the application is server is startup, Spring will read through this file and creates a Session Factory, meaning establish a session to the database using the properties that you have mentioned here. Here you mentioned Spring Data Source.url. What is the URL to connect to the database? What is username? What is password? So with this configuration, Spring will understand to establish a session from your Tomcat server to the MySQL database using the properties defined in application.properties file. Now, your database database connection is ready. Now, how to use your connection? Now let's go back and see. So now what I'm trying, instead of using this, I can use, I don't have anything, any practical example to connect to a normal Spring JDBC. Give me a minute. How can I do that? Don't worry about the normal one. I will slowly move into basics of Hibernate. So now here I'm going to create a new package called model. Model is nothing but your entity classes. Inside the model, I'm going to create an entity class. Entity means is nothing but a table mapping from your Java to the database table. So now let's see how it is. So now I'm trying to create an entity, Prio user. This is my class name. So I have created a Prio user. When I say like this entity, it's coming from Java X Persistence. So now, automatically, the Prio user will be mapped to a table in the database. Here, and I'm saying how this will be mapped to the database. So I'm adding @ table. So later on, the structure will change. I'm slowly moving into the Hibernate how things are. Table. I'm saying this is a table. And these are all annotations. Name. What is the table name in the database that you want to map from this class? So I am mapping it as Prio _ user. That is my table name in the database. Now. So here, how do you want to map the table? So now column, I'll copy this from the source code, so that'll be easier for me. these things. So for now, I'll use only 2 columns. Later on, slowly you can extend the columns. So now you see here, I have configured only 2 columns. I'm mapping from only 2 columns from the database. So when you say @column, and your column name will become first name. You can have something like this, name equal to first underscore name. So whatever the variable that you define here, this will be mapped to the first name column on the table prior user. Similarly, I'm adding last name also. For last name, and the column name is I'm adding last underscore name. Now, I have mapped 2 columns from prior user table. And I'm just generating setters and getter methods for first name and last name. That means it's only set first name, set last name, and get first name and get last name. You can see here. This is automated way of creating using Eclipse Editor. So now we have a table, we have 2 columns, I have created a mapping. Now, the next step is, how do you want to use this object to fill in the data? To do that, I am creating a generic class. Because usually to do any CRUD operations on the database, meaning create a record into the database, update a record into the database, delete a record into the database, read a record from the database. So these are the typical 4 operations that you can do on any table, meaning insert a record, fetch a record, update a record, delete a record. That's all you can do. That's all the possible operations that you can apply on any database table. So to do that, I'm creating a generic utility class which will handle most of these CRUD operations. CRUD means C-R-U-D, create, read, update, and delete. That's nothing but CRUD operations. Now let's go back, and I am creating common database functionalities in one class, and then I will eventually use that class everywhere for common operations. If you want to customize any additional operations, that part we will deal with it at later point of time. And now I am going to copy. So this is more of a Java 8 generics. Don't worry too much now. Eventually you understand what it is. Now I'm taking only one method. I don't want to take any more. List get all. So I am trying to get all of the records from any entity class. T means entity class. It's a generic behavior. Later on, we slowly fill with what is the parameter should go as a T. T is nothing but class type. We'll come to that later point of time. So now this is my generic interface that I have defined to fetch all the records from database. So I have created only one generic function. Later on, I'll create all generic functions going forward. Now, coming into the implementation. So similarly, under the DAO implementation, we already have user DAO implementation, right? I am going to create a generic implementation class also for dealing with CRUD operation, generic DAO implementation. Now, which will implement whatever the definitions I just mentioned in the generic DAO. That's it. Now, So now it still complains because I need to override one of the methods. So that's nothing. Get all is coming from generic DAO. So now I'll copy from here. So now what I'm trying to do here is, let me delete the documentation so that Java docs, so that it will be clear for you. Okay. So here what I'm trying to do is I am creating a private variable. What type of class this can accept? That means eventually whoever is using this generic behavior, they have to pass the class name. So don't get confused with what is this T. I mean, you are not there yet. So now I'm configuring. So because this is the DAO layer, I am making it as a repository that you already know about it. So now I am auto-wiring session factory. So how the session factory will come? Whatever the bean that you are auto-wiring here will come from prior. We have all this configuration already established, this configuration, right? So whatever the name, method name that you are giving here, this is nothing but bean name. Because we are mentioned as @bean. When the Spring loads, Spring will do all these implementation and creates a bean with the name session factory. So the same name we are auto wiring here, meaning when the Spring starts, Spring will first read through the configuration files, creates the beans, and then will read through controller layer, service layer, and DAO layer, and go through other annotations and establishes relations. By the time it reaches here, the bean is already available and it can automatically auto-wire with this DAO layer. Now, that session factory means here, that's the session that you established with the database that is configured, because this is coming from here. Because this session factory will be established from the properties you have mentioned in application.properties files. That's how it will establish a session to the database, and that session is auto-wired in the DAO layer. Now, I'm using every time whenever you have to use only arg.hibernate. That's the right package of right class to use. So now what I'm trying to hear from the session factory, I am trying to get the session, database session for any user, whoever logs in, they get a session and they can use it. So now I can establish the session factory to the database. I got the session. I know what class to be passed in. Now we are going to implement real implementation for get out. Now let's go back to the get out. This is all Hibernate stuff. Slowly I'll pull you. It's a pretty complicated topic. Don't get confused too much now. So now I'm trying to, what does this mean? I'll eventually explain you at one point of time what this line means. Get the session, meaning this one, get the database session, and then start writing SQL query. This one, create criteria, is nothing but start writing SQL query. What this highlighted line means, whatever the class that is passed into this. So for our example, I will pass user, prior user class. So now this dot get persistence class is nothing but prior user, and dot list meaning select star from prior user. That's the Hibernate will generate that SQL query internally. You are not writing that SQL statement. In typical traditional applications, you will write that select star from prior user. Now, we are writing everything in Hibernate as an object-oriented approach. Okay, so now this will return all the records in prior user table. So now this is only generic implementation. Now let's go back to the user DAO. So now what I'm trying to do is user DAO. What is the type of it? Now here I am passing prior user. Okay. Why it's not coming? Let's see. Extends generic DAO. That's another DAO that we have just created. Okay. So now, if you see here, I have created my own interface which will extend the generic interface. Whatever the generic interface that I have created, I have mentioned just T here. When I'm using user DAO class, I am passing the real entity object inside. So whoever deals with user DAO, they will end up using only with the user table. They cannot pass some XYZ table with this DAO layer, with this particular DAO class. So that's how you can bypass complications. Now here I am saying extends generic DAO implementation. So I am passing the prior user and what the hell is complaints? Now, so now this is protected. You see here, I have created a constructor with a protected access modifier. That means it won't go outside of it. So now, in the user DAO implementation, I need to override that constructor. Let's see. Probably I had to do that manually. Public user DAO implementation. I am writing the constructor. And I'll use the storage. Okay. I'll use simple. Why it is complaining duplicate modifier? Oh, okay. I did 2 times public. So now I have created the constructor and passing prior class. So super means it will go to generic DAO implementation. That's your super class. So I am passing, so this is the user DAO implementation constructor is the constructor of this class. When I say super inside this, I am calling super class constructor. What is a super class for this? Generic DAO implementation is super class. So that means it will call this constructor. And then it will set up what is the persistence class will go inside. So this is the variable, right? So this is what your persistence class. Now the persistence class in this situation is prior user. So wherever I get persistence class here, right? So this is nothing but prior user entity object. So now we have established user DAO implementation to deal with prior user. Now I'm removing all this junk. Now I'm saying this dot get all. So meaning I am calling get all method available in generic DAO implementation. So if I have 100 tables database, I don't need to write this line 100 times. I have implemented generic nature. I can call this dot get all wherever I want. Now, so it will return all. I mean, whatever the list of all objects. So in our situation, this will return all Prio user objects only. I mean, whatever the select star from Prio user, it will get all the records. And Hibernate will convert every record into Prio user object. So now, in this situation, I am creating a map here. I mean, slowly I'll move to the other layer. Let's start from here. String object users is equal to new hash map. Now I'm creating a hash map. Then I am looping through users. Whatever the users given by the Hibernate Prio user, and looping through all the let's say I'll say users here. I'm changing the variable name to users and looping through all the users. So map, I'm creating user list, something like that. I'll change something like that. So I'm looping through all the users. So okay. Okay, we'll change eventually. Map. Okay, map is already there, right? So now it's not the right way of doing, but just for this demo purpose, I am doing it. I will eventually change. Key. I'm saying user dot get first name, and value is user dot get last name. So now, when this map is returned back, it will have all the key is the first name and value is the last name. That's how it will go. If you have 10 users, you will have 10 keys and 10 values. So now, we have completed the service. So whenever you access the service that you created, we have created earlier to get user details service, right? So user controller, when you access that web service, get user details, it will go to the service layer. And then it will call the DAO layer. And in the DAO layer, that's where the magic happens. This dot get all, it will get all the records from the Prio user table and fill these objects. Now we are looping through all the objects and guess the first name and last name as a key value pairs and returning the key value pairs. So now we have completed all the steps in terms of the middle layer, in terms of the JTE layer. Now, the next step that we need to do is go to the database, whatever that schema that we have created. Okay, this one. Schema. So now, I am trying to create the records. I mean, now I need to create the table first. Create table. This is already you know. Create table. I will copy from my project because you already know about how to create the tables and all that stuff. So there's no point I do it again. Now, I'm creating table with only the two columns that we have mapped in Java. That's it. Now, two column user table is created. Now if you go and refresh the tables, and you will see the table is already available, prior user. Now I am inserting records. Insert into prior user, prior underscore user, and column names, first name and last name, values, chosen, and simulated. So now the record is created. Now when you do the select star from prior user, we'll see the record. One record is inserted. So now we have completed all the setup in Hibernate and in the DAO layer, and also we created table at the database level and inserted a record. Now pretty much all the work is done. Let's run the application and see how this works. Now it failed. So something I might have messed up. No identifier specified for entity. So something I no identifier specified for the entity. Okay. Let's see. Because I am doing the very basic setup, in the full-fledged setup, you don't have this kind of problems. Maybe I'll remove entity for now. We'll see what it is, how that works. It still created a problem. We'll see what the problem is. Parameter 0 of constructor required a bean of type java.lat class that could not be found. Yeah, is anything wrong there? No, you can do this. And, auto candidate. No, I don't think I did make any mistake there. Let's see. No identifier specified for entity. What kind of identifier did even define? I have to check. I don't know. Entity table schema. You're missing a field annotation. Annotation with ID. Oh, okay. Okay. I get it. So, because I did the half configuration, I tried to do a simplest configuration, but it did not work. So every entity should have an identifier. That's the problem. So now what I can do is, for this one, instead of I create like this, @ID. So some class, one column should be identifier, meaning ID of that class, entity. That's why it is giving problem. So don't worry about it. I'm just adding the @ID. Additionally, that's all. So here @ID. So this column will become an identifier for the entity. So you will get to know eventually what is the meaning of the identifier. Okay, it's still given me a problem. Okay. Generic DML requires a bean of type Java.lang class that could not be found. Let me see. I'll search again in Google to see what the problem is. So I don't know what it is. No, this is not the right path. No answer found for this. Yeah, this is what we do. Scan. There are two ways to do this. This question. Let's see. This is simplest configuration I did. Is the naming? No, I don't need this. No, I'm good there. No, whatever I'm getting here is not the right answer. The video implementation, if it's showing this. Let's see. Okay. I'll give it a try and see. I think it's not good. this is all one-time environment setups. So, once you set up this kind of environment, you will never need to change because, you establish the database and everything is only one time during your project life cycle. Yeah, seems working now. Yeah. So now the problem here, what I see is I put the repository here and passing T. That is a generic, T. I mean, there is no class. That's why it is giving me problem. So wherever the DAO implementation, you need to keep a repository annotation. Automatically, all the parent implementation will become repository because your class is having that repository annotation. Now let's look at our service, how that behaves now. Start, get the user details, right? Okay. So now it throws an error, no current session context configured. So that means we need to configure something related to Hibernate. So meaning in the application.properties file, I have configured only the database. I did not configure anything related to the Hibernate. When you use Hibernate, you need to configure, stuff related to the Hibernate also. I'll show you what it is. I mean, there are so many different properties available, but right now I configure only 2. This is a minimum setup that you need to work with Hibernate configuration. So what that means? So Hibernate is a generic ORM framework which will support any database. You can use Hibernate to connect to Oracle, MySQL, MS, Microsoft Office, whatever the database is available. It connects most of to the database. So when you are launching your application, you need to tell Hibernate what is the database that you're trying to use. That's a MySQL. And how do you want to establish the Spring session context? These are the 2 minimum properties that you need to set up. So now, when you're running this application, you end up having, a lot of different varieties of problems. So you have to read material around Google and figure that out. And you can ask me questions when you're setting up all these things. So now it's all getting configuring. You can see that all Hibernate is going through. So now the application is started up. Now let's see, that's solve the problem. Could not obtain for the current session thread. I think something else might have missed. What it should be, we'll see. So you see me, right? Each time I'm doing, the error gets changed. So that's how in the real-time projects, that's how you need to debug one by one. Let's see. So now I was able to resolve all problems. Now you see, key is my first name and value is my last name. That's how I have given in user DAO implementation. Now, let's go to the database and you keep on adding, many records, something like this. So I'm creating only Go version 3 times. Now you can see there are 5 records on my name. Now, come back to the web service and refresh. You should see, because the data might have been cached or I did not commit or what. Now it should come. Let's see. The data might, because I'm using Hibernate, what happens is whenever it gets a record from database, it will cache. Each time you refresh the database, each time you refresh the browser, it won't go to the database and get the data. It will always run from the cache memory available at the server. That's why you might be seeing only one here. So, and you can configure the cache however you want, but I'm not going to explain you now. Once you reach certain stage, I can explain you how those things will work. We'll see, and there could be another reason because I have defined as an ID. We'll see. I mean, this may not still work. I mean, there could be another problem I'm suspecting. Yeah. So now the problem here is, you see, there are so many different 5 records, but still I'm seeing only one record here. 5. Because each time the loop goes to the map. Where is that? Here. So now whenever I am doing put key, always I get key as only Govardhan. So in the hash maps, key cannot be duplicated. Value can be duplicated. So each time, though I have 5 records, it will loop through all 5 records and goes to the map, putting the key each time, keeping the same key. That's why map will not allow duplicate keys. That's why you are seeing only one record. Now, let's say I'm changing my key to something, 100. So now you can see one more record Govardhan 100. Now let's go back and see that. Now you see that, right? So you see 2 records. I mean, whatever you do, I mean, as long as you have any number of records in the database, you can get everything dynamically from database. So now, so I'm doing so many, records, I'm inserting so many records there. Automatically, you go back and refresh the RESTful web services, you are able to fetch all the data directly from the database. So we are not doing any hard codes. So that's how you can establish connection to the database and fetch data from the database and expose them as a REST-based web services. Any questions?
Yeah, like it's a bit confusing. Like we